The scent of stale coffee and old blueprints clung to Liam's apartment, a comforting, familiar aroma that spoke of late nights and early mornings. He traced the worn spine of a textbook on his shelf, a relic from his university days. 2 years at Reed & Associates, and he was still the junior architect, diligently sketching out the foundations of someone else's grand vision. Evelyn Reed, his CEO, was a titan in the industry, her name synonymous with sleek, modern design and an unwavering, almost intimidating ambition. Liam admired her sharp intellect, even as her reputation for demanding perfection and tolerating no weakness often made the office a high-pressure environment. He'd seen her dismantle entire project proposals with a single, cutting remark, leaving seasoned architects wilting in her wake. Yet there was a quiet efficiency to her, a laser focus that Liam, in his own understated way, respected. He sometimes wondered what it must be like to carry such immense responsibility, to always be the one in charge. His phone buzzed, startling him. He'd been lost in the quiet hum of the city outside his window, a gentle rhythm to his Sunday evening. The screen lit up with an unfamiliar number, but the name flashing above it sent a jolt through him. Evelyn Reed. His heart gave an uncharacteristic thump against his ribs. She never texted. Her communication was always formal, always through official channels, always meticulously planned. The message was terse, devoid of pleasantries. "Meet me. The Obsidian Grill, 8 p.m. Urgent." Liam reread it, a knot tightening in his stomach. The Obsidian Grill. It was one of those impossibly chic places, all polished chrome and hushed whispers, where the wine list was longer than a novella and the prices could fund a small nation. He'd only ever seen it from the outside, a beacon of exclusivity he had no business approaching. And 8 p.m.? On a Sunday? His mind raced, cataloging every recent project, every potential misstep. Had he forgotten something? Missed a deadline? Had one of his minor adjustments somehow triggered a catastrophic flaw in a multi-million-dollar skyscraper? He stared at his reflection in the dark screen, a man who preferred the predictable comfort of his drawing board to the unpredictable demands of high society. Evelyn Reed never did anything without reason, and urgent from her usually meant a crisis of epic proportions. His first instinct was to question, to ask for more details, to confirm it wasn't some elaborate prank. But the very thought of texting back Evelyn Reed, demanding clarification, felt like professional suicide. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, then dropped. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him, that he had to go. Whatever this was, it wasn't going to wait. He just hoped his one good blazer wasn't too wrinkled. The Obsidian Rose and the Desperate Glance. The heavy oak doors of the Obsidian Rose swung inward with a soft whisper, revealing a world of hushed opulence. Liam, in his slightly rumpled but freshly pressed charcoal suit, felt an immediate sense of being an interloper. The air was thick with the scent of aged leather and something sweet, like expensive flowers, mingling with the low hum of polite conversation. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the high ceilings, casting a warm, golden glow over plush velvet banquettes and tables set with gleaming silver. Waiters, moving with balletic grace, navigated the crowded floor, their movements almost imperceptible. He scanned the elegant space, his gaze finally settling on a table tucked away near a window overlooking the city lights. There, amidst the flickering candlelight, sat Evelyn Reed. She was striking, as always, in a deep sapphire dress that shimmered like moonlight on water. But something was off. Her usual composed, almost regal posture was subtly askew. Her hand, clutching a slender wineglass, seemed to be gripping it with unusual force, her knuckles pale against the crystal. Opposite her, a man with an aggressively coiffed silver mane and a suit that probably cost more than Liam's car, was gesticulating expansively, a booming laugh echoing just a touch too loudly in the refined space. Mr. Sterling, Liam remembered from a fleeting glance at Evelyn's calendar. He was leaning in, an unctuous smile plastered across his face, seemingly oblivious to Evelyn's tight-lipped responses. She nodded occasionally, a forced, brittle movement, her eyes darting around the room with an almost frantic energy. Then, her gaze snagged on him. For a split second, her usual formidable composure cracked, revealing a flicker of something raw and desperate. Her eyes, usually sharp and analytical, widened almost imperceptibly. Her lips, painted a vivid berry red, parted slightly, but no sound emerged. Instead, her hand, still clutching the wine glass, lifted ever so slightly from the table. Her index finger, usually pointing directions or tapping impatiently, performed a swift, almost imperceptible flick in his direction. A silent, urgent summons. It was a gesture of pleading, so subtle, so out of character, that Liam almost missed it in the opulent chaos. But he didn't. The message was clear, a silent scream for help across the glittering room. He began to move, a sudden, unexpected resolve stiffening his spine. An unexpected engagement. The clink of silverware against porcelain seemed to amplify in the sudden, tense silence that followed Evelyn's strained gasp. Liam, halfway across the opulent restaurant, had been scanning the room for her, a knot of unease tightening in his stomach. He spotted her then, tucked away at a secluded corner table, her posture rigid, her face pale. A man with a predatory gleam in his eyes, Mr. Sterling, was leaning too close, his hand resting uncomfortably near hers on the pristine tablecloth. Evelyn's gaze darted to Liam, a desperate plea silently screaming from her wide, emerald eyes. She gave a subtle, almost imperceptible shake of her head, a silent signal for help. Liam's mind raced, 1,000 possibilities flashing through his thoughts. Before he could formulate a coherent plan, Evelyn's voice, surprisingly loud and trembling with a raw emotion he couldn't quite place, sliced through the hushed murmur of the dining room.
"My fiancé!"
she declared, her arm shooting out to point directly at Liam, who froze mid-stride. Both Liam and Mr. Sterling turned to stare at her, then at each other. A flicker of alarm, then pure indignation crossed Mr. Sterling's face. Liam, however, felt a strange calm settle over him. This was it. He had to play along. He managed a charming, if slightly forced, smile and strode purposefully towards the table, his heart thrumming. "Darling, I thought you'd never get here," Liam said, his voice a smooth baritone, utterly convincing. He leaned down and pressed a chaste kiss to Evelyn's forehead, feeling the subtle shiver that ran through her. "I'm so sorry. Traffic was an absolute nightmare. And who is this gentleman?" He turned his gaze to Mr. Sterling, a friendly but firm politeness in his tone. Mr. Sterling, a portly man with a florid complexion, sputtered, his mouth opening and closing like a beached fish.
"Fiancé? Evelyn, what is the meaning of this? You told me you were unattached."
Liam chuckled, a warm, resonant sound. "Oh, Evelyn's always been a bit shy about our whirlwind romance. We wanted to keep it under wraps until the timing was perfect. You know, a grand announcement. But I suppose the cat's out of the bag now, isn't it, sweetheart?" He squeezed Evelyn's hand, feeling her fingers intertwine with his, a silent acknowledgement of their impromptu charade. "We've been secretly engaged for weeks. I popped the question during that spontaneous weekend trip to the coast. Remember the sunset proposal, Evie?" He winked at Evelyn, who managed a weak but appreciative smile. Mr. Sterling's face contorted with a mixture of confusion and outrage.
"This is preposterous. I simply don't believe you."
Liam's smile remained unwavering, though a steelier edge entered his voice. "Well, that's entirely your prerogative, sir. But Evelyn and I have a wedding to plan. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a lot to discuss." He subtly pulled out the chair beside Evelyn, making it clear that Mr. Sterling's presence was no longer desired. Mr. Sterling, defeated and visibly flustered, rose from the table with a huff, muttering indistinctly about deception and unprofessionalism, before making a hasty, indignant exit, leaving a trail of confused glances in his wake. The ice melts. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind Mr. Sterling, the sound echoing in the sudden silence of the restaurant. Evelyn, who moments before had been a statue of strained politeness, visibly deflated. Her shoulders, previously rigid, slumped, and a long, shuddering breath escaped her lips. She turned to Liam, her eyes no longer veiled by a corporate facade, sparkling with an emotion he couldn't quite name. Relief, perhaps, but something deeper, too.
Liam,
she began, her voice a soft murmur, utterly devoid of its usual crisp authority.
thank you. Truly, I owe you an apology for that charade, but I had no other choice. He's incredibly persistent, and I've been trying to politely extricate myself for weeks.
She gestured vaguely towards the now empty doorway, a faint flush rising on her cheeks.
He just doesn't take no for an answer, and I was at my wit's end.
Liam felt a knot in his stomach loosen. The tension that had coiled around him during the uncomfortable dinner began to dissipate, replaced by a strange lightness. He offered a small, reassuring smile. "It's all right, Evelyn. I figured something was up. You seemed less than thrilled." A genuine, unforced laugh bubbled out of her, a sound so unexpected it made Liam blink. It was bright and melodic, entirely different from the polite, measured chuckles he'd heard from her in the office. The carefully constructed wall around her seemed to crumble, piece by piece, revealing a more unguarded person beneath. She leaned back in her chair, the stiff posture of moments ago completely gone.
Less than thrilled is an understatement,
she admitted, a wry twist to her lips.
I was contemplating faking a sudden, debilitating allergy to, well, anything just to escape. You were my unexpected deus ex machina.
Her gaze met his, and for the first time he saw a flicker of vulnerability there.
It's not easy, you know, always being on, always having to navigate these social obligations. Sometimes I just want a quiet evening, without the pressure of networking or enduring awkward conversation.
The last words hung in the air, a quiet admission of a loneliness he hadn't imagined her capable of experiencing. The polished exterior of Evelyn Reed, the formidable CEO, had cracked, and what lay beneath was surprisingly human. The air between them, previously thick with unspoken rules and corporate decorum, felt suddenly lighter, warmer. The ice, he realized, was finally beginning to melt. Shared aspirations. The clatter of cutlery from nearby tables faded into a low hum as Liam took a breath, the quiet intimacy of their corner booth a stark contrast to the earlier chaotic rescue. I design buildings, he began, a rare flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. Well, I want to design buildings, the kind that connect with their surroundings, not just impose upon them. Sustainable, community-focused spaces. He gestured vaguely, as if sketching invisible structures in the air. But it's hard. The firm I'm at, they're all about the bottom line, the flashy facades. My ideas get filed away, labeled too ambitious or not profitable enough. A sigh escaped him, laden with the weight of unfulfilled ambition. Sometimes I wonder if I'm just naive. Evelyn didn't interrupt. Her gaze was steady, her head tilted slightly, an expression of genuine curiosity softening the lines of worry that had etched themselves onto her face earlier.
Naive?
She echoed softly when he finished, the word not a question, but an invitation to elaborate.
Or perhaps ahead of your time? Her fingers traced the rim of her water glass. My father, he was an architect. A brilliant one, though he struggled with the same commercial pressures you describe. He always said the true art of architecture was in understanding human needs, not just market trends. Liam felt a jolt, a sudden recognition that transcended their professional relationship. "Your father?" he asked, surprised. That's exactly it. It's not just about aesthetics for me. It's about impact.
Creating spaces that foster well-being, that last beyond the next quarterly report. He leaned forward slightly, his voice gaining confidence. I've been sketching out a concept for a community hub. Modular design, green spaces, shared resources. I even found a grant opportunity for sustainable urban development, but getting the firm to back it. He trailed off, the familiar frustration resurfacing. A small smile touched Evelyn's lips. "Tell me more about this community hub," she urged, her eyes sparkling with an interest that went beyond polite conversation. "The modular aspect especially. My father was fascinated by adaptable structures. He believed buildings should evolve with their occupants, not stand rigid and unchanging." She paused, a thoughtful frown creasing her brow. "And the grant? Perhaps there's a way to present it that appeals to their bottom line while still fulfilling your vision." Sometimes you just need a different translator. The air between them crackled with a newfound understanding, a connection forged not in the sterile environment of the office, but in the shared passion for creation and a surprising familial resonance. Liam felt a strange sense of relief, as if a weight he hadn't known he carried had been subtly lifted. The clinking of ice against crystal and the murmur of polite laughter faded into a distant hum as Liam and Evelyn found themselves in a quieter, velvet-clad lounge. The air here was scented with old leather and a faint hint of jasmine, a welcome reprieve from the previous room's manufactured cheer. They sat opposite each other on plush armchairs, a small polished mahogany table between them, holding 2 half-empty glasses of amber liquid.
"I still can't believe I pulled that off,"
Evelyn mused, a genuine smile replacing the strained politeness that had been her constant companion earlier. "You were surprisingly good at improvising." Her eyes, no longer guarded, held a spark of genuine amusement. Liam chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that surprised even himself. "You gave me a good script to work with. Mr. Sterling's face when I mentioned the urgent data migration was priceless." He took a slow sip of his drink, the warmth spreading through him. The easy silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was comfortable, a soft blanket woven from shared experience and nascent understanding. They talked for hours, the conversation flowing effortlessly from work anecdotes to childhood memories, from their favorite obscure films to their respective anxieties about the future. Liam found himself opening up in ways he hadn't with anyone in years, sharing thoughts and observations he usually kept locked away. Evelyn listened intently, her gaze unwavering, offering thoughtful responses that made him feel truly seen. He learned about her ambitious dreams, her quiet struggles, and the unexpected tenderness hidden beneath her composed exterior. The flickering candlelight cast soft shadows across her face, highlighting the subtle changes in her expressions, a roadmap to her inner world. Eventually, a soft chime from Liam's phone broke the spell. It was late, far later than he'd intended. "I should probably... It's getting late," he said, a strange reluctance in his voice. The thought of returning to his quiet apartment felt suddenly bleak. He pushed himself up, the chair groaning softly in protest. Evelyn rose too, her movements graceful. As he reached for his jacket draped over the back of his chair, she stepped closer, her hand gently finding his. Her touch was light, yet it sent a jolt through him, a current of unexpected warmth. He turned, meeting her gaze. The usual shrewdness in her eyes was replaced by something softer, vulnerable, a plea he hadn't anticipated. Her breath ghosted against his ear, a whisper barely audible above the distant lounge music.
Stay, please, Liam.
3 words, simple, profound, and utterly disarming. The morning after. The subtle shift. The fluorescent hum of the office felt louder than usual, a stark contrast to the quiet intimacy of last night. Liam sat at his desk, a half-eaten Danish growing cold beside his keyboard, his gaze fixed on a spreadsheet but seeing only Evelyn's face.
You rescued me.
The words echoed, a warm current beneath the surface of his professional calm. What did they truly mean? Gratitude, certainly, but there had been something else in her eyes, a flicker of vulnerability, a silent plea he'd answered without a second thought. He'd seen her distress before, but never so raw, never directed so explicitly at him. The thought sent a jolt through him, a mix of concern and something else he couldn't quite name. His internal monologue was interrupted by a familiar, clipped tone.
Liam, could you join us in conference room C? Sterling's already there.
It was Mark, their team lead, oblivious to the seismic shift Liam felt within himself. As Liam entered the room, his eyes immediately found her. Evelyn was already seated at the large oak table, her posture rigid, a slight flush on her cheeks. Mr. Sterling, a man whose presence usually filled a room with an uncomfortable gravitas, was leaning in, speaking to her in a low, almost conspiratorial tone. Evelyn's fingers were pressed against her temple, her gaze darting towards the door just as Liam walked in. Her eyes met his for a fraction of a second, a silent appeal passing between them, a desperate plea for an intervention, a subtle tightening of her jaw. Liam felt a familiar protective instinct surge. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling, Evelyn," Liam offered, his voice betraying none of the internal turmoil. He chose a seat directly opposite Evelyn, subtly positioning himself between her and Sterling's intense stare. Sterling merely grunted, returning to his point about quarterly projections. The meeting progressed, a mundane review of sales figures, yet, for Liam and Evelyn, it was a finely tuned dance of unspoken communication. Evelyn's occasional glances held a new, quiet intensity, a shared understanding that bypassed words. When Sterling's comments veered towards the personal, a thinly veiled criticism of Evelyn's focus, Liam interjected smoothly, referencing a recent market report that steered the conversation back to business. A tiny, almost imperceptible nod from Evelyn was his only reward. But it was enough. Across the office, Sarah, the administrative assistant, paused in her filing.
Did you notice Evelyn and Liam today?
She murmured to David, their resident IT guru. David peered over his monitor. Something's different, isn't it? Less formal, more like they're in on a secret. Sarah nodded, a thoughtful expression on her face.
Almost like they're protecting each other.
The hum of the servers in the far corner of the office became a familiar backdrop to Liam's days. His desk, once a quiet outpost, now seemed to be in constant motion, a vortex drawing in Evelyn's high-profile projects. The acquisition of Sterling Technologies, a behemoth of a deal, had solidified his position as her go-to, the silent, efficient engine behind her strategic vision. Their working sessions stretched late into the evenings, the city lights painting streaks across the panoramic windows of her office. One Tuesday, discussing the nuances of a particularly thorny patent issue, the conversation drifted. Evelyn, tracing the rim of her coffee mug, had sighed.
Sometimes I wonder if it's all worth it, Liam. The constant pressure, the loneliness of it all.
Liam, usually meticulous with his notes, paused, his pen hovering over the page. He met her gaze, a rare moment of vulnerability in her usually composed demeanor. It must be a heavy burden to carry, Evelyn. He offered the observation softly, an unexpected empathy in his voice. She offered a small, almost imperceptible smile. It is. You, on the other hand, seem to navigate it all with a quiet grace. How do you manage to stay so grounded? The question hung in the air, pulling him into a deeper current. He spoke of his family, his small rituals, the quiet joy of a well-ordered spreadsheet. She listened intently, her eyes reflecting the city glow, a silent admission of her own struggles. These extended discussions, far removed from profit margins and legal clauses, began to blur the crisp lines of their professional relationship. He found himself anticipating their late-night talks, a warmth blooming in his chest that felt dangerously personal. The internal conflict was a low thrum beneath his ribs. He was her employee, her trusted assistant, yet the way her eyes softened when he offered a dry, understated joke, the almost imperceptible lean towards him when discussing a personal frustration, hinted at something more. He valued her trust, her mentorship, but the evolving dynamic felt like walking a tightrope over a vast, unknown chasm. Then came the dinner with Mr. Sterling. Liam, present for the initial pleasantries, noticed the subtle shift in Evelyn's posture, the way she clutched her wine glass a little too tightly. Her usual assertive confidence had receded, replaced by a tense discomfort. He watched as Sterling's hand lingered a moment too long on her arm, his smile a little too predatory. Evelyn's gaze flickered to Liam, a brief, desperate plea in her eyes. It was a silent, urgent signal, a whisper for help in a room full of clinking silverware and forced laughter. Weeks later, the warm glow of a single brass chandelier illuminated Evelyn's dining room, casting long, dancing shadows across the polished mahogany table. 2 places were set, not the usual formal spread, but a simple, elegant arrangement of handmade pottery and linen. A quiet jazz melody drifted from unseen speakers, softening the edges of the evening. Liam, dressed in a casual charcoal shirt, felt a tremor of anticipation mixed with apprehension as he watched Evelyn pour a deep red wine into their glasses. She wasn't in her usual power suits. A soft silk blouse, the color of twilight, draped gracefully, emphasizing a vulnerability he rarely saw. She pushed a plate of prosciutto-wrapped melon towards him, her movements less precise than usual. "Liam," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for coming. This isn't work." Her gaze met his, then darted away, fixed on the flickering candle flame. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since that night with Sterling." Liam waited, a knot tightening in his stomach. He sensed a shift in the air, a different kind of intensity than their professional exchanges. He took a sip of wine, its warmth a stark contrast to the sudden chill he felt. Evelyn took a deep breath, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. "When I asked you to pretend to be my boyfriend, it was pure desperation. I felt trapped, cornered, and I was so focused on escaping that, for a moment, I didn't think beyond the immediate crisis." She paused, her eyes finally locking with his, a raw honesty shimmering within their depths. "But then, watching you, the way you handled him, the genuine concern in your eyes, it was like a crack appeared. A crack in the wall I'd built around myself." Her voice grew softer, almost fragile. "I realized then, Liam, that what I felt wasn't just relief. It was something else. Something much deeper." She leaned forward slightly, her gaze unwavering. "I think I'm falling for you." The confession hung in the air, heavy and exhilarating. Liam's heart hammered against his ribs. He'd hoped, in the quiet corners of his mind, for this, but hearing it spoken aloud felt both surreal and profoundly real. He reached across the table, gently covering her hand with his. Her skin was cool beneath his touch. "Evelyn," he said, his voice a little rougher than he intended. I wouldn't have come tonight if I didn't feel it too." He squeezed her hand lightly. "That night, seeing you so distressed, it broke something open in me as well. I'd always admired you, respected you, but that evening, it changed. I saw past the formidable CEO, and I saw you." He met her gaze, a profound sense of connection blooming between them. "I've been falling for you, Evelyn, for longer than I probably even realized." A small, hopeful smile touched her lips, chasing away some of the tension. The air in the room, once charged with uncertainty, now hummed with a different kind of electricity, the promise of a future, yet unwritten.